Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Legacy Podcast. This is your host, Jacqueline Hyacinth, and I'm really grateful today to be here with Francesca Littman, who is an amazing sound alchemist, medicine woman, songstress, and who I'm really, really honored to talk about all things expression and using the voice. And she's coming to us from England. And welcome, Francesca. Really glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just so excited to be here. I was so excited when I got your invitation. I was like, yes, yes, yes.
It's so fun. Any opportunity for us now to be able to use our voice and share in
Mm,
sisterhood in this way. Such a powerful time, that
yeah.
I know that you have a podcast as well. So it's just like we're ready to use our voices.
Mm,
And it
yep.
hasn't, it hasn't always come easy. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Hmm. Where to start with that?
Hmm.
So I guess like voice has been, I guess it's been my lifelong path, really. So I'll maybe give like some background of like how I got here to what I do. So I grew up in a household as, very highly sensitive young young human being, or embodying this human body anyway, um, into a family where basically whoever shouted loudest was heard. So that wasn't me. And it was always this kind of fight to be heard. Um, so, from a very young age, I kind of was almost like sort of self-contained and holding everything in. Um, and I mean, that's a really, really long story, but it started from that very, very young age. And sort of combine that with growing up in a musical household, not my dad, but my mum. She was a piano teacher, so there's always music in the house. And I started, well, various musical things, but singing was something that was just always there for me. And so I kind of then discovered you can, like, have training. And I don't even know if it was so much my choice, like, oh, I want to have singing lessons, but so much like, here, you're going to have singing lessons. But I don't remember that anymore. Could well have been the latter, but and I was singing in a good choir and stuff like that. And so, yeah, long story short, then age 16, I started teaching my first singing student. My mum was like, I've got this piano student who's got a younger sister. She wants to learn to sing. Why don't you try it? And so that's what I did. And for maybe like a decade, I was teaching singing. I was also studying like voice in various different forms. But it was something I fell into. It wasn't like a conscious choice.
Hmm.
Then I kind of got to this point where, I had a really successful teaching practice and I really enjoyed what I did. Like it didn't even make sense to me. Like, why do people work for things that they don't enjoy? That was like, didn't make sense to me. It still doesn't. Although there have been periods in my life when it's been necessary, but it's still like that doesn't make sense. But I was seeing, my singing students, they were doing great in like festivals, competitions. They were, well above average with music exams and all that kind of stuff. But I felt like I was living through the achievements of my students and there was something more for me. So I needed to go and find out what that was. And so that was really, I suppose, what opened up my path. I went traveling and started experiencing, different ways of working with energy, really. Reiki, I think, as for many people, that was like a big opener for me. Like prior to that, I was going to like a Qigong class, and the concept of energy and of letting go, making space, all of these things started to just slowly weave their way in. And so just over time, things have kind of evolved. So there kind of came this point, I started seeing this crossover with Reiki and the voice. And, it's just been this path of, being in this place where I didn't trust my intuition, or I didn't know it was okay to trust in that. And to step more and more and more into my intuition and just weaving. And, you know, I've had various trainings in certain things, but actually the core of everything I do, everything I offer is about working intuitively. And it's only been in more recent years I realized that this is what I've always been doing. I thought I was just winging it with my students, as you know, in my late teens and early 20s. I just thought I was making this stuff up. But actually, what I was doing already from that really young age, I was tapping into the person stood in front of me. I was tapping into the potential. I already knew what was inside of them. I got a feel for that. And then it was about cooling in all those ways of communicating and working with them so they could bring that out. So that's actually, you know, since I was 16 years old, that's what I've been doing. And, you know, yeah, it's evolved in many different ways. You know, another part of my story, I suppose, is just having been having been that quiet, you know, that quiet child who was scared to speak up and all that kind of thing. One of the things that was always happening was that I was listening. You
Mm.
know, quite often I wanted to have my voice in, and it didn't kind of, you know, I wasn't able to get my say, but I was always listening. I was always tapping into people. I was listening to what was being said. And so I realized, you know, like, you know, part of my path is it's very much about the voice, you know, the voice alchemy. And but even more so, if we take that away, the essence is about being a sacred space holder. That's what I do. And it's by listening, just tuning in and, you know, just receiving that and trusting. And, you know, this is a continuous path for myself of just leaning into that, of trusting what I think I feel,
Mm.
or not what I think I feel, but what I feel, and then my brain gets in the way. It's the other way around, really, isn't it? Or the information that comes through, and actually just trusting
Yeah.
that's that higher guidance. So, you know, there I am holding the space for whatever needs to come through. So,
Mhm.
I mean, there's loads and loads of different threads there. I could
Yeah.
share so many different things, but I guess that's kind of the essence. Then, yeah, what I do now at this time, you know, there's, I don't know, I keep reworking, like, you know, these times everything's changing so quickly.
Oh, quickly.
And so, and there's all these different pieces and experiences of my life that, you know, it's like, now I'm doing this, but oh, now I need to add this. So it's gathering all these like little gems and bringing those together. So yeah, working with the voice, supporting people, mostly women, but I do work with men as well, because they need it. They really need it as well.
Exactly.
There is that call for it, but you know, mostly it's women, working with women and supporting them in, yeah, in really reclaiming their voice and trusting in their voice, in stepping into their right to have their voice, to speak up, because how many women really feel that? I know I didn't, you know, particularly when my son was young. That
Yeah.
was like a really big learning learning curve for me. And so, you know, that's part of it, and the voice. And then, you know, I've been discovering along my path this incredible connection between the voice and the womb.
Mhm.
So this is the other part of it. You know, I use Reconnected Voice as one of the kind of names of a program. And then there's Reconnected Woman, which is, you know, there's the voice and lots of things come into that, but then there's the woman, the whole.
Mm.
And so it's about like meeting and marrying these things together and just weaving, always weaving intuitively. And, you know, everybody is so different. We're so unique. And I find it really interesting, you know, like particularly in this world of social media, and we have to present ourselves in a certain way, and like, this is the program, or this is the course, or this is the session, and this is what you're going to get. And
Mhm.
you know, obviously I've had to kind of try to meet with that in some way. So people, you know, if I just say, just come and we'll see what happens. Not everybody's going to buy it. There are some people who will just feel the energy and they'll be like, yes, but a lot of people, they need a little bit more information, which I totally get. I'm the same. Well, I say that actually, when I feel good with somebody's energy, I don't need any more information. That's it for me. But that's been a long process of personal involvement. Um, but as I say, you know, we have all these yeah, these ideas, and it's very much the masculine thing. And order is good, don't get me wrong. We need some of it, and I probably need a little bit more of it
Yeah,
in my
I
life
hear
every
you.
now and then. But um, in the end, it's about like what does that individual need when they come? And because you can have an idea, you can book a session or a workshop or whatever it is with me or with somebody else, and you have an idea and you have an intent. But when you show up, something else may be prominent in that moment. You might have just had an argument with your partner, or somebody might have cut you up when you were driving and it's triggered something in you, or it could be anything. And actually, we don't necessarily realize it. That's connected already because you set your intent, it's connected. But that's the surface stuff that we have to work with in order to get to that deeper stuff. And if somebody's very much in that headspace, it's like, well, I booked this because I want to deal with this particular experience that happened when I was age 5. And then I've gone to this session and this guy cut me up and we've just dealt with that. Some people can't see that there is this connection. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that's even ever happened, but that was just, the first thing that came to mind. But, people, if they're too much in the headspace of like, this is what I want, and then I got this, but that's not right. They're actually kind of cutting themselves off from the real deep healing. But when you can say like, okay, this is what I'm arriving with. I thought I was going to deal with this, but this is what we dealt with. And then you open yourself and you see, of course, the energy doesn't stop when you leave that session, when you walk out that door, or you close a computer down or whatever. And that's just the start. This is like yeah, from there it's starting to move. So I think, yeah, I think that was quite a long answer and possibly not
That's
directly
okay.
to the question.
It's beautiful. I just want to say I apologize that for to you and the audience with my coughing every now and again. I'm like, oh, let me hold it until you're done saying something, but I don't have
Mm,
control of it. So sorry about that. Um, just healing from a
can be
cough.
the same here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She and Francesca were just talking about grief coughing
Mm,
and chest colds. So, audience, if you are experiencing any, tightness in the chest and the releasing, it's all part of opening the lungs and using the voice and letting the grief out.
mm,
So, I want to lean into something that both of us serve mostly women. And you and I have worked together, and just this deep, deep understanding. And I want to kind of get some feedback from you, and I want to lean in a little bit about some of the things that are coming through for me. Why is it so much more challenging, it appears, for women to be able to find their voices? Like in your work with women, like that's kind of like the bedrock. It's like power and voice, right? Those two things are like
mm.
um yeah, so is there what are your feelings about that? What are you seeing, or what are you sensing in your own life and your walk with women?
Mm. I think just having been doing this now for so many years, like what I see, this is old. This is like really, really old. This is not just about this lifetime by any stretch of the imagination. This goes back historically. If we look at the Abrahamic religions, for example, um, and I think a lot of our kind of like histories and cultures are based on these where women were put below men and women did not have a voice. So, this is really ancient, but it's not always been that way. And if you look at, if you look carefully into the history and the stories, there's been all of these very powerful women who have essentially had to kind of go underground, I suppose. If we look at, okay, nobody's ever going to know what the truth is of anything, but we can feel it. We look at Mary Magdalene, for example, you know, the her story, all this weaving that's coming out in these times, and this energy that we're feeling and tapping into and experiencing, and just seeing this sort of this silent thread of the women who've kind of they worked silently behind the scenes. And um but yeah, there is this very like deeply embedded belief that women are less than. We're
Mhm.
presented the idea of a male god,
Mhm.
which for me does not work in the slightest. For me, it's a point like everything is that balance of the masculine and feminine. It's before that separation even. I digress though. But it is so deeply embedded. And if you look at, for example, during the Inquisition and like the witch wound as well, where, women were, they just were not safe to be them, to do these things that were so deeply embedded in their history and the ancestral lineage, and like meeting together, like even two women, like to speak on the street during that period of history, that alone could brand you a witch and put your life at risk and impact your family.
Yeah.
So this stuff it's really, really, really deep. And so we're at this time, we're kind of starting to shift through that. Women are stepping up, but then we've had this period, I'm an 80s baby. I was born in 82. And I was born into this period of time where women were stepping up into their power, but they weren't in their feminine. They were having to do this from the masculine. And so, but we're now at this point where it is shifting, but we're having to really relearn, and we're also having to relearn our bodies.
Mhm.
Because, and this is the other thing I find really, really fascinating, and I notice it of myself as well. If I'm not fully connected, I do this too. But so many women speak from here, and you can feel the energy when somebody is just up here and they're like in this state of panic and they've really, really got to get their words out. You can feel that, like everything's up here, but it's not rooted, it's not grounded in the body. And that's because we've been cut off from our sexuality. Like so many mixed messages about our sexuality, which is our seat of power.
I
And
think
it's about that.
also
Yeah.
across the board with men too, right?
Mm,
Men are also really cut off in that way.
mm,
So it's like it's been a societal condition
mm.
that I'd like to think that we're trying to heal from,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And yeah, it's fascinating to see because intellectual thinking, the intellectual mind, being smart is something that is it's it's so sadistic in many ways because it like you can get talked into anything when you're using the mind. Right? But if
Mm,
you're not using your sensorial experience and like really like leaning into the belly, what your womb, what your body's telling you, if you're just up here, you're so easily controlled and manipulated. So it kind of goes back to that thing that you were saying around like relearning the body, coming back into the body, because it energy doesn't lie, and even if our feelings they're real in the fact that we're feeling them, even though we could be triggered by somebody, for example, right? And that other person could not be causing harm at all that's sitting across from us, but because of our own latent need to heal and pull stuff up. But that's an important piece of like learning how to fine tune the instrument so that we can even start to use our voices from a place of like dignity and respect. Because most of us are talking and we don't even have anything real to say. Right. So it's like finding the voice, like the real voice, right? Because we can get up and talk about all kinds of things, but are we talking about something that is like true and real from our essential self?
mm,
So it's
mm.
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. What's coming up as you're sharing that? I'm just thinking back to when I lived in the Netherlands, and particularly early on, and I didn't speak the language. I had maybe like literally a few words or something. Um, it was a really, really interesting period for me about tuning into energy, because I would go and be with people and sit in circle and everyone would be speaking in Dutch,
Mm,
and then feeling into the energy, and I'd maybe pick up one or two words, but I'd find that actually the essence, and in these places people were like really sharing from the heart, but like the essence of what we have to say, it's so simple. And there's all of these words, but by tuning into the energy, it's like actually I can feel what that person's saying. Like, we use words because it's our way of expression. That's what we're taught to do. And I'm a Gemini. I love words. I love to write. I love to speak. Um, but actually, the essence of what's underneath is very simple. So we do, yeah, when we come back into that, really feeling in our bodies, like what's really happening here, and knowing it's safe to do that. And I spend, like I say, Gemini, I spend a lot of time up here, but I realize I have to keep bringing it back down into my body. That's not a 100% natural state for me to be in my body just because of my own life experiences, my own traumas and things. That's why I love when I work, because the moment I work,
Like,
I'm
yeah.
aligned. All the blah, blah, blah kind of just quietens down. And yeah, it's one of the things I most love about this. Or when I'm working with my voice, the moment I start working with my voice, then, and particularly if I'm singing and feeling into those vibrations, then something different's coming through. Um, but there was one point I just wanted to go back to, is that men, for sure, yeah, they have been cut off from this, but still, most men, when they speak, they are still much more connected with their lower chakras. They might be talking from here instead of from here, but their energy and their power, which is, particularly get these men with these big booming voices, it comes from down below. And this was kind of made really clear for me when my son was, I can't remember, maybe like 2 years old or something like that. And I'd be at home with him all day. At that time in my life, I didn't really have much in the way of support. I didn't have a network or anything. I was quite isolated. So I was just, like many mothers, exhausted.
Yeah.
Just the whole day with like a little person who's just like blah, 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 all day, toddler tantrums, etc.
I'm with you.
And I would,
Club is
yeah. And, I would be telling him no to things and he just wouldn't listen. And his father would be like, it's not that hard. You just say no. And like, when he would speak, boom, our son would listen, you know.
that's
I'm
a
not sure,
beautiful,
sorry.
that's a beautiful example. I want to,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'd have to say sometimes, maybe there was a cutting off. Don't get me, he's a great dad, but there may have been in those early years a cutting off actually of my son's expression in moments, which he's learned, really learned into and stepped up as a dad. So I just want to acknowledge that. But it was so clear, like he had that. And then there was this one day, I think this had been brought to my attention, and there was one day when I was in that space of clarity enough, just for that moment in time, that I spoke to my son from down here, from my belly, and just no, or stop doing that, or whatever it was that needed to be said. He listened.
Mm.
And I think it was like the one time he ever managed to do that. But it was a really profound moment for me, because it was just such a clear demonstration of, if a toddler is listening or not listening based on your energy, I mean, these, they're unfiltered and you see so clearly with them. But this is actually how we behave through life. Like
Mm.
when we listen or we don't listen to somebody, or how we receive their words, has, yes, it's a lot to do with us. Like what we receive, perceive will be through our filter. But there's also that part of, how does their voice sound?
Mhm.
Like, how are they using their voice? And I've had very interesting experience just the last few days of a couple of different opportunities came up my way. Like one was something to do with self-care, another one was a business thing. And I was sharing some messages with people. And initially I was just like, yeah, these seem like good things. And I already feel overwhelmed with stuff. So I was adding extra stuff, but I was just like, Gemini, like, let's add some more stuff to the pile. But then I spent some time really feeling in, like, what was I feeling from this person's voice? And actually, I could feel I didn't feel that resonance. There was something in their voice that, for me, in this moment, doesn't mean there's something wrong with that person or the way they speak. But for me right now, I don't feel the resonance. So then I was able to speak honestly about what I need at the moment. I didn't speak about their voice because that's my thing.
Exactly.
But saying, yeah, okay, actually, you know what? I realize this isn't the right time for me. So I'm going to let this go. And I maybe wouldn't have paid that much attention, except then I had this other opportunity, and it was the same thing. Listening, like there's something in the tone of voice here that doesn't feel quite in alignment for me right now.
Mm.
So I'm going to put that down too. And it was having these two side by side, just like, okay, I'm picking up. Like I know it, but it was just like, you know, sort of like neon signs or something. Just like, okay, actually, I'm like really tuning in right now to the energy through somebody's voice, which, like I say, I'm doing it anyway, but these were just so, so clear and making that connection. What's right for me right now? What's resonant? What supports me? What is my truth? What's in alignment with my voice?
I love that you turn it inward. Like when we think about expression, we always think of it about being me, right? And then outward.
Mm,
But then even being able to perceive it, the expression of others and how you interpret that is also such a powerful gift. It's really that ebb and flow of learning how to use a gift of full embodied expression to both express and also read the expression of others. So it's not happening in a
mm,
vacuum,
mm,
right? Like even the sincerity in someone's voice or the way that, yeah, the way someone anchors their voice and whether it makes you feel safe or it makes you feel, like you want to jump around or you want to leave the building, like whatever it is, there is
mm,
definitely something that we're consistently sharing with one another through our expression. And it just, every time I'm reminded of this and sitting with beautiful women who are speaking about intuition and about their power, this is the shit we take for granted. Like it's so amazing to be able to, yeah, I can read voices, like I can read the room. Like these things are a superpower for us, right? And it's something that we just take for granted, or since it's something we can already do or that we just kind of know how to do, it's like this is actually our wealth. Like
mm,
it's so powerful to be able to honor. Let's just honor right now and love up on these
mm,
gifts because
mm,
I mean we've spent a lifetime like trying to regain our strength in them and come home to being like, oh, the sixth sense that my mother had or my grandmother had, that was like normal for women. It really is it's like our normal way. It's just that 95% of the planet isn't operating in that way.
mm,
Yeah, so just honoring
mm,
the gifts of that and intuition and voice, and
mm,
this is the sweet medicine that we carry,
mm,
that subtlety. It doesn't have to be loud and overt, and it can be. Mm,
mhm.
yeah.
Um, and I think the thing is that so many of us have these gifts and we just don't realize it. It's only when you stop and you reflect or you hear somebody else
Yeah,
talking about it and just like, oh, hang on a minute.
totally.
Like, and maybe we don't always know what to do with those gifts, but it's also okay. Like we just have them. They're just there and
Yeah,
they show us in the moment that we need to use them.
yeah,
So, I've got this, yeah, like it just seems like the most bizarre thing, but I am, and I only really became like consciously aware that maybe not everybody has this, like maybe like 5 years ago or something. But let's say I'm sat in my house, the windows, like I shouldn't be able to hear anything from outside, but I see a branch or, a leaf moving or something. I hear it. There is a sound, like this movement, this vibration inside my body. I won't necessarily be conscious of it until I look at it, but when I look at it, then I feel it.
yeah,
The same with birds flying. Like when I became aware of that, like there were birds, like one time I was in this field and there were these birds flying overhead, out of audible range, but it's, oh my God, it's so noisy out here.
yeah.
But I became more conscious of that because there's a percussionist called, I think it's Evelyn Glennie, who is deaf, but she's like a world famous percussionist. And she was talking about how we receive, we're actually receiving the vibrations. She feels the vibrations to know how to play all of this music. And actually, we're always receiving that. And this is part of the voice. It's understanding that voice is two-way. It's we're physically using our voice, we're creating vibrations with our voice, we're expressing our voice. or not, but that's part of it. But there's also the listening, the receiving, and the really like tuning into to what's going on. And that's the, this is the receiving part, the internal part of the voice. And then you could call it the feminine part of the voice, I suppose. And then there's the sort of more masculine energy of the voice coming out and having that symbiosis of both those parts working. And we all have that. We just need to slow down and
Yeah.
hear it.
Yeah. And it feels so good to give into that.
Mm.
Yeah, my heart's like, ooh, it does. It feels so good. It's like buttery, juicy sweetness to just allow yourself to say what you want to say and mean what you mean,
Mm.
uninterrupted, and just like, yeah. Mm,
Mm. Mm. I think that's one of the most powerful things of women coming together, whether it's in, big circle, or for me, this is still circle, you
mhm,
know, like when there's two of us, because then we suddenly come into this safe space where you can actually share your voice, where you're free to give an expression of what's inside of you and to have it witnessed and be held in that, and to be honored
yeah.
just for sharing your voice. And in sharing it, we actually hear it as well, because we get rid of all of that,
Do.
all the extra stuff that's moving in between all of the words. We actually can hear ourselves better when we express.
Mm,
And something I really want for listeners to know is like your story is valuable. Like it is so needed for this world. Well, it doesn't need to be like your whole life story. Just, that little thing that happened today with your kid or your partner or your ex-partner or your friend or your boss or whatever it is, that story of what happened and how you navigated through it, that is medicine, actually sharing that, because it gives permission for somebody else to share. And somewhere in there, even if there's not like clarity about what happened, or you feel angry, or
mm,
it's bringing stuff to the surface, by sharing, then it opens up that space for somebody else to share something.
mhm.
And to, there's so much wisdom inside of us, like in our stories. You put women together, there's almost always a common thread between all of those stories. And actually, even when it seems like there's not, there is. And there's something for us always to learn from one another. And we don't realize it. Like, even the most dark, difficult, challenging things we've been through, that very often provides gold for somebody else.
Mm.
And I think it's really important that we really acknowledge and honor that.
When you say that, the words that come, that it just makes me feel like saying everything is alive,
Mm.
right? Like everything is alive. The story is alive. The voice is alive. Like everything is animated, right? It's just life is so effulgent and present in that expressive giving, receiving. It's that super simple commonality of connection. Like grace just opens. It's like the alphabet starts to move, and it's so fragrant. Like there's so much. I bet you, if we paid attention close enough, you and I right now, and we just watched our words and the expression go back and forth, like it's lit up in color, right? It's lit up in, there's so much that is here when we listen with the heart
Mm.
and see with the heart and hear with the heart, you know? Oh, let's
Mm.
keep practicing that.
Um, and see, it's really fascinating. Like the moment that I think you use the word alphabet there, and then I started seeing, like, I'm just seeing light codes.
Totally, it's just codes.
It's just like, wow.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
magical.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm. It is. It is. And we're always weaving, always weaving.
we are. We really are.
Mm.
So this call for the voice, you know, in my own journey around voice, which is continuously evolving, and as you well know, and these different iterations that come right from these the deeper self, always like kind of coming into the next iteration of who we're becoming, right? And that new one needs to find a new voice. And so it's like peeling off the layers of these parts of ourselves and then opening up into like the next essence. And it can take time, right,
Mm,
to like find the strength of that voice. Like, who does this woman sound like today? Like, and it that can change moment to moment, right?
mm.
Like, I was a different woman yesterday than I am today. Yes, I'm always me, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this greater power, this like we are consistently shifting, evolving, and growing. And it's so beautiful being in like-hearted space because we understand that. Whereas the
Mm,
regular world might not perceive reality in that way. We give each other permission in our relating to consistently emerge with new expression. Like if you sounded the same or looked the same or talked to me the same for 10 years, I probably wouldn't want to hang out with you anymore. Right? Like it
I
would
hear.
be right. It's like we want to see each other thrive.
Mm,
Like I feel like when we find these spaces, especially I think as women practitioners and like who are doing, who understand the deeper mechanism of like ugh, what we're trying to liberate and move through, there's this unconditional sense of understanding that's like, I really am cheering for you inside of my body. Like your win is my win. If you are
mm,
singing and using your voice, there's something inside of me is like is being moved by that same voice.
mm,
It's so yummy. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. It's a beautiful way of expressing it. And I find it so interesting on this path because it's like you kind of reach this point where it's like, okay, I've got everything sorted now. And like here I am, like really fully in my voice. And then the next thing will come along to show you,
Well, you're not.
like,
Yeah.
no, no, you've got more work to do. And that's okay. And it's ever evolving. And yeah, I think it's so important to have love and compassion for ourselves in this because it's not that linear path. It's this sort of spiral that, and sometimes we're going to deep, dark places and shedding layers, but it's like that need to go deep.
Yeah.
And there was a period for me, sort of last year, I suppose, that I disconnected from myself because of certain things that were happening in my life. I sort of went through a lot of periods of grief and stuff like that. And I wasn't living my truth. I wasn't actually fully honoring myself, fully honoring my voice. I was just like, okay, I can hear that, but I'm going to put that away for later because like I've got this situation right here, right now that I'm in. So, um, but those things eventually those layers they peel away, and sometimes it's gentle, sometimes it's not. It's the easiest way to say that if I talk of my experience in more recent times. But it's so important to have compassion for ourselves, even in the midst of that, because it's all part of the voice as well. Even when we feel that disconnection, it's part of that voice journey. And how do you know what it feels like to be really centered in your voice and centered in your power? How do you know really the truth of what that feels like if you haven't experienced the opposite?
Yeah.
And it's just remembering we need to have those experiences of the opposite in order to deeply appreciate when we are
Mm.
fully centered, fully in our wholeness. And also be okay, like if we kind of come out of that, if something kind of jolts our world, which it probably will do here and there because that is the nature of life,
It is.
that's also okay. That's all part of the expansion.
It is. Yeah. What would you say right now? This is like there is a world that is longing to use its true authentic voice, right? And then there's also, we're seeing a world that is so loud right now. Like there's so much blurting out. There's so much like my truth, and people using their voice and, for lack of a better word, vomiting, using the voice as an instrument to vomit on the world, because of pain. And I get that, been there. But that that pendulum swing, right? Of like learning how to use the voice and then people just using the voice, like weaponizing the voice in such a way that it
Mm,
becomes an instrument of pain or something that can be used to penetrate and cause harm. Voice is so powerful when you look at,
mm,
right, like that full spectrum of how it can be used because of how it's funneling power.
mm,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, I mean, they say, spells.
Yeah.
It's literally casting spells, and it's understanding that we are doing that whenever we're using our voice. And what is it that we want to create? What spell is it that we're really centered in our hearts? What is it that we truly want to bring into being? So many, I think probably most of, if not all of the world's religions, in the beginning was the word.
Yeah.
In each of those stories, there's that understanding that spoke, it can also be thought because that's vibration too. But that speaking something out loud, that's how we're creating. So just constantly coming back, what do I want to create? And also having forgiveness for ourselves when we mess up, because we're human and we will. And I do it continuously. But then I'm aware, like, okay, and just pull back. And I think it's that, think for ourselves, those of us who are awake, those of us who do have this consciousness, just to put our voice out there and then step back. And if that wasn't exactly what I wanted to create or wasn't what I wanted to say, okay, let me learn from that. What can I take from that? How can I do something different next time? How can I bring more love
Mhm.
through my voice? And just that continuous cycle of, like, because forgiveness is such a huge part of this. And there's not a lot we can do individually for, all those who don't use their voices in a conscious way. We can't stop that. That's not within our power. What is within our power is ourselves.
Mhm.
And the attention, like where we put our attention, are we putting our attention on this voice that's shouting really, really loudly something that is like triggering the hell out of us, that is just so against our truth? Are we putting our attention there and giving our power away to that? Or are we coming back and saying, okay, this thing's getting triggered inside of me. How can I bring more love into this?
Mhm.
How can I be kind and loving and nurturing for myself so that I can put that down? And okay, that person's using their voice in that way, but that's theirs. I'm going to keep their energy stays over there. I'm going to stay in my energy. What do I want to bring? What am I bringing into the world? How am I, bringing the polarity of that
Mhm.
in a beautiful way? And understanding, again, it's polarities.
It is
That's part of,
the
you
nature.
know, it is like we cannot understand something fully without the polarity. It cannot exist. If it exists, the opposite exists.
Mhm.
And it's kind of just continuously coming back to that neutral point and just accepting. So, I found what I like to refer to as the world apocalypse, the world apocalypse from, in 2020 and so forth. I found that a really, really interesting period because we had people shouting on each end of the spectrum, and I found myself on one end fighting in some way against the other. And I said, hang on,
Same, same.
look what I'm doing here. It's like, okay, now I'm coming back to neutrality because actually I don't really feel like I want this to exist in my world. I can't stop it from existing out there, but the more of us who are not giving any kind of power to this, the less power it has, and the more it will just dissolve, that energy will dissolve.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of something when you're sharing, which is like in today's world, you will hear like an empowered voice, or like there's still this kind of idea that like to use your voice effectively or authentically, that it has to be a big voice, right? Like even podcasting or like whatever it is, that you have to have like a big, strong singing voice. And expression and voice, I'm just like was remembering something so subtle, like even being able to communicate in a whisper, but it is the truth, is using your voice in an empowered way. Like
Mhm.
just really like it's so, it doesn't matter the volume actually. It really is just about the context of the vibration of what is being expressed, and can it be heard.
Mm.
So yeah, I just was remembering of like a really tender moment with a sister. We were getting ready to host a retreat, and it was the first time that we were going to be doing something together. And these relationships can be so tender, right? When you're going in to share a sacred work together and so forth. And there was this incredibly vulnerable, powerful voice inside of me. It was like the shaking, it seemed so small, but she was so powerful. And she just came out in the middle of our relating, and she was like, please don't hurt me. It
Mm.
was like, it was the most, it showed such great strength, and the connection and the power that was felt in that moment from just this tiny little voice was like it changed the entire dynamic of like the tenderness of the relationship, where it was able
Mm.
to go from that place.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm so grateful to just have that memory right now. But so yeah, audience,
Mm.
whoever, if you're listening, voice is so, it doesn't have to be extreme, and it can be. Like I'm loud as fuck half the time. I'm super expressive. I curse a lot, all the things. And also it can be silent and soft and yeah.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. It's a really beautiful story, and I think it just really demonstrates as well just the power of vulnerability. Because we've been taught that to be vulnerable is weak, and actually, it's the absolute opposite. That's where the true power lies, is in the vulnerability. And yeah, and like the other thing I just want to touch on that was coming up as you were sharing about this is also like understanding with our words how, like, where are we putting the energy?
Mm,
So, listeners will probably notice there's moments where I'm, you know, talking loudly and expressively and excitedly, and the energy is really going out. And then these moments where we slow down and we quieten, and actually what's happening then with the energy, it's drawing people in. This is part of I remember learning about this concept actually years ago during my training for what was it now? Like like certificate of teaching with my music stuff, and reading The Inner Game of Music. And it was talking, I don't even know if it's actually sort of specifically about energy, but I suppose that was my first kind of real kind of awakening, if you like, to the concept of energy and performance. Understanding that there is this dynamic of the energy between the performer and the audience, or the speaker, or the singer and the listener. And so the energy can be going out, and we can be pushing a lot. And sometimes those big voices, what they're doing, they're pushing out a lot of energy. It's going to fall on deaf ears because it's too much. Sometimes people feel like, nope, that's my boundary. That's too loud.
yeah.
I'm not resonating with this. So they put up that energetic wall. So that person can shout as loud as they want, but nothing is going to be heard. It's not going to be received as they want. But when they change that, And this is what you get, when people are getting defensive, for example, that's what happens.
Yeah.
But when we pull the voice back, we're really conscious, like, okay, this is important. I really want you to listen to this. In
Mm,
that moment, by softening the voice, you're inviting that person, they're actually bringing their energy to where you are to hear it. And also, if they're willing to do that, that's because they really want to hear it and they're ready to receive it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it also is the opposite. You really get to know if somebody doesn't want to hear you and if you really don't want to hear
Mhm.
somebody, right? Like how
Yeah.
you can be in that dynamic as well.
Mm,
Mm,
yeah. I think one of the things that I've learned, or not, I think I know one of the things I've learned on my path, and one of the things that I will say to my clients and anyone I'm talking to really about the voice is that it's with the voice, as we learn to express ourselves more fully and to stand in our truth and just share those vulnerable parts of ourselves, we also there's a necessity to have I can't think what the word is. I had it and it left. But discernment, there we go. That's
mm.
what it is.
I love
Because,
that word.
yeah, discernment. Because there are some people that no matter how you express what you need to express, whether you shout it from the rooftops or whisper it quietly, they're not able to receive that because they are just not in that place.
Agreed.
And it's really important just to recognize that okay, sometimes there are these people that in our lives that they are just not going to be able to hear us, and just allowing ourselves to let go of that need to be heard by them is so powerful. And there are other ways, there's a beautiful exercise that I think is on my website. I encourage people to do, which is just a way of releasing unspoken words. So when there is somebody in your life, either they're still there, or maybe they've passed, or they've left your life for whatever reason, and you haven't been able to speak those words, it's about coming into this sacred space and literally speaking those out loud to them energetically so that you can release those, doing it in a loving and respectful way, and releasing them to their highest self afterwards with gratitude and whatever. um, and what's really interesting about this exercise is, so I use this a lot with one of my exes, so my son's dad. We separated a while ago, but when we were together, I very often didn't feel heard by him, and we'd have an argument, and he just was not open to listen at all. I would go upstairs and I would do this, and maybe just whisper it or whatever, and I would speak out all of that stuff I needed to say, and then I would get clarity of what actually needed to be said, and I would go back to him. And something in the energy had already shifted because his higher self had received all of that stuff. He might not have been aware of it, but he'd already received all of this stuff. And then because I had that clarity within myself, I could go in and actually say the things that were important. And he was in a better state of listening. One, because he'd had that space. Two, because energetically he'd already received that. But it also didn't matter so much at that point. It wasn't so important whether or not he heard what I had to say, because the most important stuff, all that stuff that was like supercharged, and it does, when we feel angry or we feel hurt or we feel passionate about something, it's got that supercharge. Being able to actually let that out helps us just to come back into that state of peace within ourselves, and to just get more clarity and see, sometimes there are words, there are things that still need to be said or expressed, or maybe that person can't hear that, won't receive that, but then it's like, okay, so what am I needing here? Like, how can I take care of this myself? Like, what am I not hearing? Or, where, what is it? Is it like more love that's needed here? How can I love the hell out of this?
Yeah.
And just, very often it's the inner child. How can I hold that little girl or
Yeah.
little boy, whatever? How can I hold that little being within myself and just hear on that different level?
It's beautiful. It's so
Mm,
beautiful and so important. I agree with you that exercise is beautiful. I'm a big fan.
mm,
I'm always offering that to my clients too. I'm like, not everything needs to be said. public, like to the person. A lot of it is for us, for our own process. So discerning that is a really beautiful tool. Yeah,
Mm,
thank you.
thank you.
So tell the audience how, if anybody wants to work with you, tell us anything that's coming up. What do you need to share about?
Mm, well, being Gemini, fully in my Gemini flow at the moment, there's a lot going on. So in terms of sort of group work, so I live quite close to Avebury Stone Circle in the UK. So for anybody who's kind of in this area or drawn to this area, the 21st of April, I'm offering a Reconnected Woman Retreat Day. So we're going to be working with the voice, but also connecting with the body, connecting with the womb. There'll be a sound immersion. So I'll be working with my voice and sound. And it's just really a day to come into contact and connection with yourself as a woman, and really, give the love to your body that you don't normally give, and have that safe space to express as well. So that's one thing. I'm in the process of co-creating. It doesn't have a name yet, but it's a sort of online voice workshop with this beautiful divine masculine I connected with last year, who came on my podcast, and he works with voice. It's like, oh my God, we need to do something together. So at the moment, we have a date, the 19th of May. That could change, but at the moment, there's no other information, but just online. Yeah, something's happening that day. Um, then sort of my big project, the big baby at the moment, is co-creating with beautiful sound soul sister of mine. I mean, she does many, many beautiful things. We're looking at creating a retreat in southwestern France next year. And I believe we're calling it the Sacred Feminine Immersion. And that's going to be really about the coming home to yourself, just allowing, you and I were talking before, weren't we, about the energy in that area of France, just the way that it's so beautiful, it's so healing, it just holds you. So this has been something I've been called to do this for a long time, and now is the moment. It sort of fell through for various reasons before, but now is the moment to just bring people to this really beautiful, beautiful part of the world, and just be in that energy. And we will go and visit some places, but the most important thing is going to be about just being in that energy and coming home to yourself, and that connection with nature, and all of the beautiful things that we're going to be weaving together within that, and just women connecting with women and just being held in that space. So there's that. And then just generally, like, working with me, I do a lot of my work I offer online as well as in person. So I do, yeah, like the voice healing work, so people can come and have like individual sessions with me for that. I also have my Reconnected Voice program, so that will be something that's put together very specifically for the individual. And that can be like, say, a minimum 3-month container, so that we kind of work on some much, much deeper stuff. I mean, a single session is amazing, but like what you're going to get by working all these different aspects.
The container is always so much
Yeah,
rich.
yeah. So there's that. And then my Reconnected Woman kind of program is also weaving its way. It was partly made, it never quite made it into the world because it wasn't the right time, and now it's just about to come onto my website in the next I hope weeks, if not within the next month or two. Sound healing, all sorts of other things as well.
All of that will be accessible on your website, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can find all of that on my website.
For sure.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Before we get ready to close out, is there anything else that you want to share? Do you feel like, what are you feeling?
Let's feel into that. It's okay, just like a couple of minutes, just for the listeners, just to tune in to themselves, their voice, if that's okay.
Do it.
If we've got space for that. So I just want to encourage If you're listening, obviously, if you're driving, please listen to this later. But but yeah, if you're able just to take a moment just to step into stillness with yourself and just taking some deep breaths. And if it feels right, maybe you want to place one hand over your womb space. That's the energetic womb space. It doesn't matter if you've got a physical womb or not. And then one hand over your heart, or if you prefer, one hand over your throat, whatever feels right for you. And then just taking a moment to really breathe into that, just really acknowledging, honoring your voice, just giving that space for whatever our journey has been thus far. Just a moment of acknowledgement, any moments in time when you felt that you haven't had a voice, that you haven't been able to express, just holding those in love right now. Just breathing into that. And then when you're ready, just taking a moment now to really tune into, acknowledge, honor all those moments when you have used your voice, no matter how the outcome has been, whether it's been fully aligned or not, just the fact that you've had the courage to use your voice, giving yourself love and compassion for this. Your beautiful human self who is always learning in this life. And just understanding it's just a part of the process. It's all part of your learning. Just really holding your voice in love, celebrating yourself, celebrating your voice, loving your voice, no matter what she sounds like, no matter how she comes out. Just loving that you have a voice. Like, wow, what a gift. What a gift to have a voice.
Mm.
Just taking another deep, deep breath into that. And then releasing that breath. One more. Releasing. Just taking a moment to say thank you. Thank you to your voice. Thank you to your being, this beautiful being here in this human body, this beautiful divine expression. And then when you're ready, just taking a few more deep breaths and slowly bringing yourself back into the space. With deep love and appreciation for yourself.
Yummy.
Mm.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. Audience, I highly recommend Francesca. I've worked with her myself, and yeah, it's a worthy pursuit. So thank you to everybody who is listening and who tuned in today. I hope that you found some medicine here. And thank you so much for bringing your heart to the space today, and I appreciate it.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to everybody. And thank you, Jacqueline, also for holding this beautiful, beautiful space and bringing voices out into the world, inspire others.
We're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, everybody. Thank you.